perspectives and values from 50 years of music ministry. And that's what we're going to go do. The music minister at the church that I was at, and I'm still there, will recognize this. In fact, any of the people there, this is To God Alone Be Glory. When I first went to South Main in 1987, this was in the floor of the choir room. You will recognize it as being what? This. Soli Deo Gloria. You know where that came from? Bob signed his music with this, SDG, when he finished his music. I knew that. And therefore, I loved seeing this on the floor in the choir room. And thank you for closing those. I did not know that he prefaced much of his music with Jesu Juva before he started. And Jesu Juva means, Jesus help! Maybe not like that, but that's kind of what I thought when I was preparing this. and some of you can know that that's the truth. So, as I pondered what to do with this time, I kept coming back to what I've called foundational thoughts. And as you can see, the first one was, how does God speak? And it came as foundational thoughts to me, but before I get to that, I have a question. Do you remember things that happened in your childhood? I mean, things that happened to you. How many sort of do? How many sort of don't? Okay. Well, I can't presume that people do, because my wife does not so much. And she's told me that she mostly remembers what her daddy videoed, but it wasn't video in those days, it was 16 millimeter film, which we still have. So I know those too, I know that part. But I happen to remember. And God bless you, you're going to hear some. So we're going to start with a little story. And the story is, in your mind, go with me back to a rural county in South Carolina called Clarendon County. It's about halfway between Charleston on the coast and Columbia, right in the heart of the state. It's in what's called the Low Country. And it has swamps around it, good farming country around it, and it had a good little Baptist church in it. And that Baptist church was Manning Baptist Church. And the church and the town was Manning, which was a South Carolina, which is a Clarendon county seat town, a very proud little town. And the church, Manning Baptist Church, was a pretty healthy little church, I thought, growing up, and I still kind of think so, because I remember learning the stories of the Bible that I'm guessing all of you learned. The story of Jonah and the whale, and Joseph and his coat, and Joshua in the Battle of Jericho, and we even had a song to that one. And then we had David, and he defeated Goliath, and my gosh, we did a little song about that, little David, play on your harp, and this is what I learned in Sunday school. And I learned about Samson, and his strength, and his folly, and learned about Paul, and the blinding light when he was going, and how, you know, things changed for him. He became from Saul to Paul. This we learned in Sunday school. I learned about Moses and the burning bush, and what happened in the burning bush? Well, it didn't burn up, but he had a little chat with God during that time. In fact, all of these characters here, they all had a little talk with God. And they all talked to God, and I thought, man, God doesn't talk to me like that. I really thought that. So, how does God speak then? Well, I know that it was important, and I wished He would have talked to me like that, because I know it was important to me as a child, because there's another story from my childhood. Once I was going to my grandparents' house in Turbyville, a big 19 miles from Manning, and for some reason I was alone. No siblings with me, and my grandmother and my aunt were there, and this big storm came up. Well, it scared me a lot. because I wasn't at home, and the wind was blowing, and the hail was falling, and the rain was falling, and I just said, "Let's pray!" And they said, "Isn't Tommy cute?" No, they missed it. A side story, and my grandmother would be super embarrassed to hear that story, by the way. She was kind of a spiritual woman, but anyway. Side story, and related to that came up recently. My father-in-law, who's 99 and a half, lives with us now, broke his leg a couple of months ago, and he was in rehab on Father's Day. And on Sunday of Father's Day, we decided to go have lunch with him. So his two daughters and myself went to the rehab center and had lunch with him, and this story came up. My father-in-law is really a bright man and a sailor. He loved to sail, and he had a place on Lake Buchanan, which is a lake in the heart of Texas, out in kind of West Texas. He was on a cove there, had a sailboat, loved sailing, kind of a big sailboat. He was in the middle of the lake with his grandchildren. He was the only adult. One of them is sitting here. And they were out in the middle of the lake, and another storm. What is it about storms? And needing to talk to God. A storm came up, and it wasn't just perfect, because Perk got we call him Perk, got the boat turned around, and in so doing somehow messed up the rudder, and it got stripped. So he was rudderless out here, and a storm coming up in the middle of Lake Buchanan. If you've never been in the middle of Lake Buchanan when the storm's coming up, I have to tell you, it's a scary place. And it's not only scary, it's a really dangerous place. So, but he's a good sailor, and he's a very creative man, especially back then, and knew what to do. So he rigged up with an oar and rope somehow, and pulled the sails down, and got that boat turned around, came and got it into the cove, let the wind push it all the way into the cove, while anxious parents were awaiting, because there were no cell phones in those days. There was no, you just had to pray and wonder. So they came in, and when they got in, very anxious children got off the boat to the very anxious parents, and my wife Brenda said to my son Conan, "Did y'all pray, say your little prayers when you were out there and the wind came up?" To which, and we remembered this at Father's Day, to which he is said to have said, "No, we said our big prayers." So, I mean, talking to God it's kind of serious, not kind of, it is dead serious business. And it's something that we need to be thinking about and knowing a little bit about. Side story is over. Go back with me now to Manning. I'm a little bit older, little county seat town in South Carolina. I'm at my house, which is a little 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, white asbestos shingle house with a Ford tractor place on the east, and my grandparents' house, which is a more typical southern house, up high and large, on the west. I'm standing in our dirt driveway looking at my grandparents' house over there, and I looked up on the roof, and there up on that roof was my Uncle Ike. I thought to myself, that is way cool. I think I'm going to do that. And I knew darn good and well I'd probably get in trouble, because, you know, it's kind of high up there. But curiosity gets the best out of you. And so I went up there, and I fully expected Uncle Ike to say, "Hey, you got to get down here, boy. You're going to get in trouble up here. You might fall off this roof." But he said, "Hi, Tommy." And I was, whoo, that's pretty good. He said, "Good to see you. Hey, do you mind helping me a minute?" He not only didn't fuss at me, he said, gave me a job to do. And I thought, man, that is cool. "Yeah, I'll be glad to help you, Uncle Ike." "What?" He said, "See that guy wire over there? Would you get that and hold it for me?" I said, "Sure I will." I got it and held it, and man, I felt like I was big time important. Turns out I was. I didn't know this till later, because when we came down from that house, he said to his mother, my grandmother, in the house, and my mother, who happened to be there, "Man, I was stuck up there. I didn't tell you what he was doing. He was installing a humongous 1950s era television antenna. Now, in the 50s, television antennas were big. They were tall, and they had a rotor on it, because you had to turn it to make it go to Columbia that way and Charleston that way. And remember, Charleston was 72 miles that way, and Columbia's 64 miles that way. So it had to be tall and big, or you weren't going to get anything. And oh, by the way, those were the only 2 stations ever that you were going to get. So he told them, I was stuck up there. I had that thing, I got it up, and I could not get it down to move, and I couldn't secure it. And I was sitting there praying as hard as I could. Lord, send somebody up here. And I had to ask myself, hey, did God send me up there? He didn't talk to me like he talked to Moses. He didn't give me a burning bush. He just said, that's just my curiosity. I just went up there. So, could it be that I was actually an answer to prayer? Could it be that that's how God was talking to me? Fast forward a couple of decades at least. I am the minister of music at Columbia Baptist Church in Falls Church, Virginia, which is the Washington, D.C. area. My Uncle Ike is the pastor of Screven Baptist Church in Georgetown, South Carolina. He wrote this up, this very story. He wrote it up and sent me a copy of it, which I'd like to say I cherish, but I have no idea where it is. and he, it's from his perspective of praying and answer to prayer, talking to God that way. And I can tell you from my point of view and from my perspective, I felt nothing except the typical thing that I would have wanted to do. Curiosity and a young teenage boy really just wanting to do things. God works through that? I'm going to say, yeah, He did. And I thought, that's not one of the 5 senses we have, is it? I mean, I didn't, and he didn't use sight, sound, smell, taste, or touch. Those are tangible, physical senses that God gives us, that information enters our bodies normally through those ways. But there is a spiritual sense. And that's kind of what was going on there. I was reading this book. In fact, some of you may recognize this book. Adam Hamilton, who is a Methodist pastor, and obviously an author, in his little book, God Helps Those Who Help Themselves, and other things the Bible doesn't say, has this in his book, and it's related because this, he says, when I read what he said, it sounded exactly what I had felt as a teenager. I feel that my mission is to pay attention as I go through the day to see where God might need me. I seek to be alert to those who are sorrowful, to be alert to those who are sorrowful, or someone who needs help, or a situation in which I might make a difference. When I approach the day that way, I have found that God speaks to me not through some audible voice, but through a gentle nudge. And because sometimes I'm spiritually hard of hearing, I'm never quite sure whether it's God who is nudging me or just a random thought that came into my mind. But over time, I have come to trust that when I feel that nudge to do something, I should pay attention. I kind of think he's right about that. I think Clara Scott, did I take it out? I think I must have. I think Clara Scott gets that in her hymn, "Open my eyes that I may see, glimpses of truth thou hast for me. Place in my hand the wonderful key that shall unclasp and set me free. Silently now I wait for thee, ready, my God, thy will to see. Open my eyes, illumine me, pay attention." Sometimes God uses us and we have no idea, like when I was a teenager. Pay attention. That has happened numerous other times as well to me. And while we're here and speaking of spiritual sense, I want to go ahead and introduce you to, if you don't know, do y'all know about the awareness wheel? Anybody know about the awareness wheel? Brenda does. I have found this to be an incredible tool. Dr. Dale Keaton, who worked with me at Columbia Baptist in Falls Church, Virginia, is a psychologist. He is, in fact, the founder of the Vienna Family Therapy Center in Vienna, Virginia. But he served on the staff at Columbia when I was there. Pastor Neil Jones said when he went to that church at Columbia in the D.C. metro area, his first staff member was a psychologist. Not a minister of music, not a minister of education, a psychologist. And he helped us all, and one of the things he did while on staff, when I was on staff there, is introduce us to this tool, awareness wheel. This is a method of helping to analyze things, and here's how it works. The first one is I sense. That is, with the 5 senses you have, through the 5 senses, receiving information. Just the facts, ma'am. This is just the facts. There's no opinion about it, no feeling about it, just what comes into your ear. I heard you say, I saw, I smelled, I touched, just the facts. Then, second one is I think. That is a perception or a deduction or a judgment. So if you see the trees blowing out there and you live in West Texas and it's blowing pretty hard, you see and you say, man, I think the wind is blowing. So that's a perception. You don't know it because you think it because of what you see. Second one is feel, and that is generally an emotion. You can feel, you can feel with some kind of emotion. So, I feel afraid. I feel glad. If it's us and a breeze blowing, I see it and I go, whew, man, I'm glad there's a breeze. But if you're out in West Texas and it's blowing like crazy, you're feeling a little fearful. And the 1, 2, 3, fourth one is I want to. So if I'm in West Texas and I see that blowing like crazy, I'm going, I want to make sure there's no tornado coming. And so you run down and check it out and get into storm shelter. And the second one is, the last one is, you do it. So this is how it works, and it works really well in a particularly difficult, if you're in conversations. I have used this to when I know I've got a difficult conversation to carry out, where there are disagreements about things and we're seeing it from a different point of view. First of all, you boil it down to the facts. What did you see? And don't go on feeling. You don't want to act on your feeling. You want to back it up. This works in conversation. It works with I think, I feel, I want. And if you heard something and you feel angry, or you feel confused, or you feel whatever, you want to, this is a place to spin it backwards and check it out. I heard you say, did I hear you say correctly such and such and such? And you have a chance to go back around. Sometimes it helps to do this when you know you have a difficult situation before you make a call or before you have that conversation. Tamara Thorpe explains it this way. It's extremely helpful to use the tool to reflect on your experience of the situation before you communicate with other persons involved. This will help you eliminate a lot of the judgments you have about the situation and hone in on exactly how it made you feel, that situation, and how to resolve it. Much of what happens with difficult conversations is people getting caught up in their their version of the story, which does not lead to resolution. Sometimes the process of reflection alone can eliminate the need for any discussions at all. And this is an example of that somebody found. I have found the awareness wheel to be a useful tool to help me correctly be aware in conversations and make responsible decisions on action to be taken. So the action that is taken then in that part there is not one from an emotion, it is one from spinning that wheel. Often in a conversation you got to do it more than once. You keep on going. So, oh, there it is.
There it is.
Okay, we did that a minute ago. So, foundational thoughts. How does God speak? We heard a story, a spiritual sense, and yes, the physical senses He uses too. And I think God speaks to us in all of these ways. Second foundational thought for me was, who am I? You ever think that? Who am I? It kind of is important to know who you are. The scriptures help us with this. The Psalms tell us that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. They tell us, hey, you are a child blessed by God. Not only that, you're joint heirs with Christ. And not only that, you are children of God. Oh, you're also a sinner. Lest you think you're God. You are a sinner saved by grace. So, let's use another biblical example. This one's going to be Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now these boys, did they know who they were? I'm going to think they did. And what happened to them? Come on, come on.
Well, they wouldn't eat the food.
Huh?
They wouldn't eat the food. They were true to who they are.
They were true to who they are,
And they were put.
and it got them thrown into a fiery furnace. But let's review a little bit more of that, because if you read the story earlier than that, what happened? Well, first of all, they were in a foreign land, right? Because they were a conquered people. So there they were, and Nebuchadnezzar, is it Nebuchadnezzar? Yeah. Nebuchadnezzar is the king, and Nebuchadnezzar had a dream which Daniel correctly interpreted. And what happened to Daniel? He got put in charge of the kingdom. And what happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Daniel, their buddy, put them in charge of the provinces. They were leaders in the country. This was a good thing. They were riding high. Have you ever ridden high? You ever had things going really your way? Things changed. What changed? For them, what changed was somebody told the king that it'd be a really good idea if he just made a golden idol and told everybody they had to bow down and worship the golden idol. Well, that's when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, oh man, we can't do that. In fact, they said specifically to the king, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and He will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if He does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Bam. They did get thrown into the fiery furnace. That didn't go over well with the king. And God saved them. But they knew up front that's not a given. They knew up front that God was not necessarily going to save them. So it helps to know who you are, because it makes a difference in how you deal with things. Does it not? I've been there. I've been there. I've been where there are times when the only firm ground I can find is God speaking to me, and who am I? And faith, trust. Things to think about. How'd you get to be like you are? My daughter calls this the food, F-O-O, family of origin. Your family of origin has a whole lot to do with who you are. Your parents, the raising you had, there are all kinds of things that you have that make you who you are. What about the friends and experiences that have helped to make you, helped to shape you? For me, one of those was, a lot of that was at Baylor, right here. And did you ever hear, my sister tells me this, my oldest sister. She said, man, I couldn't leave the house without my daddy saying to me, remember whose you are. Remember, you're Rembert Coker's daughter. So, yeah, who am I? You're a child of God. Remember what the scripture said? You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are a child blessed by God, and you're joint heirs with Christ. And lest you forget, sinners. So, who am I? And then we get the next foundational thought for me. I'm calling it 3. God bless Ken Meadham. I tell you what, he was fantastic today. It was just fantastic, and so was Aaron Conaway. Ken's presentation of do y'all know Moses? Does anybody not know his Ken Meadham as Moses?
Yeah.
No? You don't know it? Here's the story. And Jack Taylor is the pastor who made this sermon famous. Moses, way back there in the wilderness, saw some smoke, came to the bush, and the bush was burning. God said, take off your shoes, Moses, etc. You're on holy ground, Moses. I've chosen you to be my man, Moses. Way down in Egypt land. Moses said, not me, Lord. Just like me, he said, I can't talk so good. You know my brother Aaron? He can sing like an angel. He can talk like a preacher. Not me, Lord. And so God talks to Moses and tells him to throw down his rod, and his rod becomes a snake, and you know the story. And it was a sermon first. Well, Ken Meadham heard the sermon, and then he made up this song, which somebody at Word put it into print and made an SATB thing, which I have done numerous times over the years, so that's why I know it so well.
I said we all do.
We all.
No, not everybody. I'm looking at some. Oh yeah, you do. You do for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
The food.
The food does.
Definitely knows it.
But at the end of this thing, he says to Moses, he says to us, Ken says to us, what do you hold in your hand today? And then he uses this phrase, to what or to whom are you bound? Moses was bound to his rod. It was his salvation. It's how he did his work. He couldn't let it go. He had to let it go. And he got it back, and then it became the rod of God, with which he did all the works that Moses did. So, when I think of whose am I think of what? To whom or to what am I bound? And at certain times, that's different things, isn't it? So, I want to be bound to God, and I think I made a commitment personally to be bound to God way back when. So I'm God's. Other things that I think about whose I am, well, I'm bound to my spouse. It makes a difference. I'm bound to, when I was working, I was bound to my job, and sometimes that was great, and sometimes not so great. Sometimes it was almost kept me from being a Christian. Sometimes, I mean, you know, I'm talking humanistically here, but other times it is a wonderful gift that I have to be able to work there. So, but to keep that in balance, whose am I? I'm first of all God's. I'm not first of all the jobs. The church and the family, oh yeah, I'm bound to those. I'm gladly bound to those. But I'm bound get this in order for me, you know. Commitments? What commitments have I made that are really being heavy on me right now? And are they keeping me from doing what I really ought to be doing, or are they a means of doing what I really ought to be doing? Oh my Lord, addictions. Ugh. Those are rarely good. Sugar, whatever. Whose am I? It's a question I think is foundational, and that it helps me to come to decide and to look at. Whose am I? Thought number 4. If you go work in a church, you ought to have this one. What is the church? Well, here's the short definition right from the internet. Everybody knows the internet, right? So here's the deal. Read it. Church is the translation of the Greek term ecclesia and is used in the New Testament to identify the community of believers in Jesus Christ. And the Bible tells us the church is the family of God, and not only that, the bride of Christ. And we sang songs about this just today. We've just been doing this today. Family of God, the bride of Christ, community of believers. We heard sermons on this. Body of Christ. That's pretty close. We are, as the church, the body of Christ. Do you think about that? That's serious stuff. And I think about that, and I go, what makes a healthy church then? And wait a minute. If the church is the body and the bride, and I am the church, wouldn't what makes a healthy church make a healthy me? And I think the answer to that is yes, it would. I worked in 2 different churches who examined exactly this. One was at Columbia. I'm going to tell you that both of them worked. We both came up with worship is being the first thing in trying to figure out what a healthy church is. Worship, and I see that as the vertical relationship right here. What we got to do. The second one was, and the churches, South Main is worship, discover. At Columbia, it was worship, fellowship. Both have to do with horizontal. This is the community of believers. At South Main, it's worship. Discover has another element in it, which is examine yourself and figure out your gifts. How did God gift you uniquely? What are those gifts? And at South Main, there's even retreats. The staff went on a retreat. We did a retreat. I did this to figure out what your gifts are that you may not know about. And several people in the church have discovered they have spiritual gifts that they didn't realize they had. I can tell you at South Main, because I happen to be on a committee that chooses people to do things, we have the answers to these things. We have what people said, what came out of that retreat. And where they have gifts, we try to assign them to committees and to ministries where they can use those gifts most effectively. It makes a difference. And the third thing that makes a healthy church is share. At South Main, it's worship, discover, share. At Columbia, it was worship, fellowship, ministry. What this is get this thing in gear. Go forward. It is do something. So at Columbia, it's every minister, every member, a ministry. Find your ministry. And it's our job as staff members and the church to help people find their ministry. At South Main, it's worship, discover, share. Share your gifts. Share your time. Share the gifts that you have with the body. To be about that, because you're not going to be healthy if you don't have all of these things. And what's more, not just have them, you got to get them in a proper mix. Think of it as a recipe that is like you're cooking. It's not going to work well if you don't get the recipe right. I don't know, because I'm not a cook like that, but I'm married to somebody who does get that right. Now, and since worship was first in both of those, let's go ahead to focus on music, and let's focus on worship. Lovelace and Rice, where's that little book? I had this little book. In 1965, there was no internet. There was barely television. There was television, but they didn't have stuff like this, and they didn't have. But in 1965, I was had completed junior college and had even had a year at Baylor, and I was serving in Lawrence, South Carolina, at the Second Baptist Church because I came back for the summer to work because I needed a job, and that was what I loved doing. And I discovered this little book. It's music and worship in the church, and obviously, since I'm showing it to you after all these years, it's followed me and had an impact on me that just sort of worked all of these times. What time did we start? What time were we supposed to get out?
We started at 2:45.
Should be 3:45.
25 minutes.
I got 25 minutes? Thank you. What time am I supposed to get through? Quarter till?
Quarter to.
Yep.
Oh, good. Thank you. So, Lovelace and Rice, I'm going to put this whole thing here. Read the last. Any music in the church must, leave out therefore, must be judged in its relationship to worship, they said. Well, they had me hooked right then. When music is stripped of all its technical language, it reveals itself to be a part of life, as natural a form of expression as speech. It can be an aid in worship in the form of organ music, anthems, and responses, and can become a means of worship in singing of hymns and doxologies and in congregational chants and responses. Therefore, any music in the church must therefore be judged in its relationship to worship. So, we're going to focus on, you thought this was going to be about music and worship anyway, so it is. 4 characteristics, again, Lovelace, this is Lovelace and Rice. What did I do? I don't know what I did.
Press backspace, I think. You just typed a letter in the box there.
Backspace.
I don't know what I did.
Delete.
Yeah, delete it. Delete.
Okay, I'll have to do it a different way. Focus on music and worship. 4 characteristics of music which give it an organic relationship to worship. Or, I'm going to have to do this a different way now. I don't know how to do this.
Pop it back.
How do I get out of that thing over there?
You're down here.
Yeah. I need to talk. Okay. Yeah.
So we're gonna
There you go.
you're down.
Yeah. Okay. I did. My fat fingers did the wrong thing. All right. So, they say music and worship both have the element of mystery. We can agree with that one, can't we? Let me find the place here so that I don't just make this up. God is mystery. The human mind cannot comprehend God. The infinity of His creation is beyond our comprehension. Music can help express the inexpressible. Job was given credit for trusting and worshiping through the inexplicable hardships he endured. I'm going to say we're seeing that right now with the Bradleys. There's no way to explain that. It is a mystery. In the same way, and maybe in a different way, that Psalm 8 shows the mystery of God when it talks about, when I gaze into the night skies and see the work of your kingdoms. What is man that you're made for me? You made all this. How do you know me? That's a mystery. Paul says, I see through a glass darkly, but then I'll see face to face. Lovelace and Rice say it this way: the mind of man cannot comprehend the wonders of God. It can only see occasional flashes of light which shine through the glory holes of life. In the awesome areas of life's mystery, music helps people express the inexpressible. We got that today in worship, did we not? Ken Miedemann showed it to us today. Fantastic. Emotion is the second one. And here I am being emotional, so good grief. So Emotion is obviously a worship element as it is a musical element. Music goes from tapping your toes, and we've done that in the music sessions that we've had today, to pensive music where you have to be quiet and let it speak to you. You know? So when Ken was playing at the end of today's service, I couldn't move. I just had to stay. Just sit there a minute. Till the Spirit moves me to get up and do the next thing. The next part is creativity. God is the great creator. Let us not forget that. Music has to be created again. It has to be recreated. It's not the music, it's not the notes on the page. It is a song that is sung again. Worship is the same way. There are new praises to be made every single time. There are new confessions that have to be made. Remember, we're sinners, saved by grace. It has to be that over and over. And I love this one. When I retired, one of the places we went to worship, you know, when you're working in a church, you don't get to worship with other churches. You're in your own world. So when we retired in 2012, I'm telling you, we went to every church we could count of every kind of Christian denomination that there was. One of those churches happened to be an African American church downtown Houston, St. John's Methodist Church. And that day, Juanita Rasmus was preaching. She ended her sermon on the creation with this: God's words spoke the world into being. Your words are creating your world. What you say makes a difference. What you do makes a difference. And creative, do you not feel more closely kin to the Creator when you create something? I do. And I feel a gratefulness to God when I have created something. So there's a kinship there. And both have an affinity to language. Let's go to the next one. They happen to speak from opposite directions, though. Read it one more time. So speech goes from the intellect. Ha ha ha.
Let's see that again.
So proud of himself.
Yeah, you're a smart ass. So we go from music starts with emotion and sort of goes to the intellect. Speech starts generally the other way around and goes from the intellect ahead to the emotions. And man, when they work together, watch out, the imagination is fired. So anyway, Lovelace and Rice helped me get that concept early on. It never left me. So foundational thought, recapitulation, let's do this quickly. How does God speak? It's important to know that He speaks and how He speaks, and to listen and pay attention through all the means that you have. Who am I? I'm God's child. I'm okay. I am okay. You got to figure that out and accept God's grace. Whose am I? And by the way, how you got to be like you are and fix the things that aren't right, right? You've got to be working. Whose am I? I belong to God, and what is the church? Those are the things that we, I think, need to understand. Okay, let's go. Now we get to build.
This thing?
No, the mouse.
This thing?
She needs a mouse. I hope we don't need it anymore.
Well, I will bring it right back again.
We'll be through.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you.
So we're going to build the building. Now that we've got the foundation laid, and for me these were found, I'm just telling you what I thought. This is nothing marvelous or anything, but I kept going back to this as foundational thoughts. But it's a foundation, but this is what we do. And let's talk about it. Let's go one at a time. With the ministerial team, develop a rhythm of the year. It doesn't need to be all blow and go. It can't be. It has to be a rhythm. It has to be up and down. It has to be sometimes when you're doing this, and you got to recover from that. And in spite of what we heard today, yesterday, there are not 2, 3 Christian seasons. Pre-Christmas, Christmas, and recovering from Christmas. That is really not very spiritual, I'm just saying. So, it is develop and do it intentionally, otherwise, guess what? The have to do it becomes the pattern that you use. That's not good. With brain and with a team, develop the rhythm of the year. Train and inspire musicians, that's what we're about. Because the next generation, that's what Alleluia is about too, by the way. Provide meaningful tasks and projects. Next one, communicate, provide schedules, ask for feedback. You see a lot of this happening right here at Alleluia being shown to us. Be fiscally responsible. My administrator says, say that 3 times. And I can tell you from experience, one of the churches I went to, I followed a music minister who had been irresponsible with finances. Not that I was always responsible with that, good Lord knows. We are sinners, remember? But I followed, and it took 2 years to live down that, and I literally had to live it down. Because I was expected to be irresponsible and I was not trusted. Without trust, you don't have much. You have to build a trust relationship. And it's worthwhile doing. So be fiscally responsible. Get organized. Make a plan. Work the plan. This little daytimer thing really helped me with that. It's a system that helped me when I put everything together. It's a paper system. Computers help us with that now a lot. Be a valuable team member. If you weren't, you are valuable. If you're on the team, you're there for a reason. Consider that you're important and be dependable. Do your job. That's what we should be doing. Oh, you'll put it back. She wants to get that.
Oh.
And just leave it up there. And get your music out, and we're going to sing 3 songs. Let me see if I can find that.
Golly's got nothing but
Wonderful pianist. Who's in charge of everything? Yes. Thank you. So we're going to start with, let's start with a children's piece, which is I Was Glad. These are things that I put together when, well, I put it on My Score because Pepper came up with a thing called My Score, and I thought, hey, I should try to make that work. So I wrote this long before. I wrote it when my mother was suffering from Alzheimer's, and I asked her favorite scripture, and she had taught Sunday school a lot when she was a young girl, and she was even the church organist as I grew up. And even though she didn't have her mind with her very much, and I made her tell me what her best scripture was, and she came up with, well, I guess I'd have to say it was, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. And I can remember her actually doing that with children. So I wrote this little tune, and it's basically unison. It goes into 2 parts at the end. So here we go. 1, 2, 3.
When they said unto me, let us go into the
was glad when they said, "When you said unto me, let us go into the house. Let us go into the house. Let us go into the house of God." I was glad. Well, we did that at Columbia. Actually, the children's choir did that at Columbia, at South Main once. I took twice, actually, I think. Let's look at "I Will Arise" next. "I Will Arise" is, it started as a quodlibet, and I think my wife Brenda and I did this, the song is a duet. "On ye sinners poor," while the other did tom, tom, the center section. Where is it? Amazing Grace. It became the center section of this, which is on page 6. It's page 6 in my copy. I'm not sure if it's linked.
Yeah.
So the men have, and look at if you got the Amazing Grace through men. It's in 4. So don't let that get you off. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so it works that way, and it ends with a little acapella. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, we got a little acapella section on page 11. Other than that, it rocks along at 5/4, because I happen to like a jazz musician who did this, and I happen to like both of those gospel songs, hymns, and both are pentatonic, so it seemed to fit. So just be careful about the 5/4. 2, 3, 4. Come ye sinners, poor and needy, weak and worn and sick and sore, Jesus ready stands to save you, full of pity, love of God. Guys, you get a part? Here we go. I will arise and go to Jesus. He will embrace me in His arms. In the arms of my dear Savior, for their heart and thousands. Come ye thirsty, come and welcome God's sweet bounty, glorified. And through repentance, every grace that brings you nigh. I will rise and go to Jesus. He will embrace me in His arms, in the arms of my dear Savior, all their heart and
thousand charms. In the arms of my dear Savior, oh, that art and thousand
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So, and the last one that we will do, when I found out they would let me do anthems for this, I gave them two. They said, "That all you want?" I said, "Well, shoot, I got another one." So, yeah, I know. So, Silent Night. is, actually, I did this for the youth choir in Colorado Springs in 1974. When we were doing what I call community concerts, and this was to be done in the library in Colorado Springs. With the guitar, I hope, but truthfully, it doesn't work with the guitar. It works great with a harp. And so, it works best, I'm just going to talk, we will not do that part, but it works best, as far as I'm concerned, to have the harp do the thing, and then the first time through with the melody is a solo, or a child, a little small ensemble of children who have been well trained to get the phrasing right, because it demands a lot. And for me, it works again best to have the adult choir in the round. And we ended our Christmas concerts with this several times, where the men, part of the men are still in the choir loft, and the women literally are surrounding the congregation. And so when the child's part is over, then the women come in, and it's a whole different sound with them on the second stanza, Silent Night, Holy Night. Let's just do a little bit of that on stanza on bar 3. Oh, we'll give us a lead in of one measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here we go. Hold this over. Good. And get that rhythm right. And then the harp does this, and then you go. You can't do it on the piano, but anyway, and then from that sound of the harp continuing, that comes this a cappella choir, again, surrounding the congregation. It's the best way. Now, Houston Chamber Choir has actually put this part on a recording they did, this part. But I'm just saying, it really works great like this, so let's do it. 2, 3. And then we go out singing and praising, and you do that again, but just on cruise. Now, we're finished except for this. Thank you for being here. I'm thrilled that you were here, and I want to say to you a little charge. I think we need to perceive of ourselves as the present incarnation of an ancient line of those who've been called to make His praise glorious. This is your shift, your watch. You We are following in the footsteps of Jubal, Miriam, David, the disciples, Gregory, Pope Gregory, Palestrina, J.S. Bach, Isaac Watts, Charles Wesley, Don Husted, William J. Reynolds, and countless others. You name the people. Add your own names, and rest assured, your models will determine who you will be. I have a friend, Ben Riddles, whose model was a singer who lived in New York, whose name was Earl Wrightson. I had never heard of Earl Wrightson. He was a famous singer back in the day. At one time we were at Ben's house, and he said, "You want to hear some Earl Wrightson?" I said, "Absolutely." Earl Wrightson sounded just like Ben Riddles. So, the point is that we are called to look way beyond current practices of church music in our local area for models, learn to choose the finest and the best from those models. The first fruits is how the Hebrew Bible talks about this, and work to connect those practices in meaningful ways to today's practices, all the while responding to the needs of the people and colleagues in your local, unique church. When that sounds impossible, take heart in the fact that Jesus said, "I will be with you always, even unto the ends of the earth." And let's not miss when he said that. It's the Great Commission. It's not, first of all, about music. It's first of all about the gospel. Bruce Leafblad was right when he said music is the servant of the gospel. We are servants of the gospel. So value children, teach them, use them appropriately in worship. Value youth, give them meaningful tasks. Value congregational singing, do what is necessary to encourage it. Value Christian history in word and deed. I am finished. God bless you.